The mop hits the marble floor at exactly 4047 in the morning, and that sound, that hollow, wet slap against cold stone, is the sound my life is made of now. I drag the bucket around the corner of the executive corridor, the wheels squeaking softly, the bleach smell rising around me like something I've learned to breathe. 43rd floor. Whitmore Capital Group. The kind of building where the elevators have mirrors on 3 walls so the powerful can admire themselves from every angle. I am not supposed to be here. I mean that in more ways than one. My name is Peter Clayton, 26 years old, former graduate student in architectural history, now a janitor on the executive cleaning crew, and, as of 11 weeks and 4 days ago, pregnant with a child I have no reasonable explanation for carrying, except I do have an explanation. The explanation is 6 feet 2 inches tall, has dark hair that curls slightly at the temples when it rains, and is currently asleep somewhere in the penthouse apartment 2 buildings over. Completely unaware that the Omega he spent one extraordinary reckless night with is now mopping the floors of his company and hiding a pregnancy that his entire board of directors somehow already knows about. I haven't figured out how they know. That part still terrifies me. I push the mop in slow arcs, watching the wet trails gleam under the fluorescent lights. And I think, as I have thought every single morning for the past 6 weeks, about the night that started all of this. It was during the Omega Rights Gala at the Hartwell Hotel. I was there as a server, picking up extra income between my graduate stipend checks. He was there as the keynote speaker, Damon White, chairman of the board at Whitmore Capital, 34 years old, alpha, and somehow the most quietly careful man I had ever watched navigate a room full of people who wanted things from him. I watched him all evening without meaning to. He had a way of listening, actually listening. When people spoke to him, his head tilted slightly, his dark eyes steady and patient, as though every word mattered. Most of the alphas in that room wore their status like armor, their pheromones turned up like speakers at a concert. Damon White smelled like cedar and something cooler, something restrained. Like a man who kept his nature under very deliberate control. I spilled champagne on his jacket. Of course I did. The glass slipped. I was tired. I'd been on my feet for 7 hours. And my tray was too full, and the pale gold liquid splashed across the lapel of what I would later learn was a $4,000 suit. I remember the cold shock of horror, the way I grabbed napkins from the nearest table and started dabbing at the fabric, apologizing in a low, rapid stream, and then his hand, warm, large, unhurried, closed gently over both of mine and stopped them. "It's fine," he said. "Just that. No irritation, no performance of graciousness for the crowd. Just the 2 words, and the way his eyes found mine with something that looked almost like amusement. "It's really not," I said. "That jacket probably costs more than my rent." The corner of his mouth moved. "It does. But rent is more important than jackets." We talked for 20 minutes in the corner of the hallway near the coat check. Just talked. About the gala, about the history of the building, which I knew well because I had written a paper on the architect who designed it. He asked questions. He remembered my answers. When his assistant appeared at his elbow to pull him back into the room, he paused for a moment, looking at me, and there was something in that pause that I still haven't found words for. I found words for everything that came after. Or rather, I found no words at all, only sensation, only warmth, only the extraordinary experience of being wanted by someone who seemed, against all reason, to want exactly me. We were careful. I thought we were careful. I was on suppressants. There was no reason for any of this to have happened. And yet, 11 weeks and 4 days. The test I took in the gas station bathroom on the highway outside the city, because I couldn't bear to take it anywhere I might be recognized. I stopped mopping. Press my hand against my abdomen, still flat, still giving nothing away beneath the shapeless dark uniform. The morning light is beginning to push in pale gray through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the end of the corridor. Clayton. I spin around so fast, the mop handle clatters against the bucket. Marcus Webb is standing at the elevator bank, and everything about him is wrong for 4053 in the morning. He's dressed in a full suit. his silver cufflinks catching the dim light, his expression set in the particular configuration I've come to recognize over the past 6 weeks. The one that means he's been waiting for me. Marcus Webb is the vice chairman of Whitmore Capital's board. He is 61 years old, immaculately turned out at all hours, and, as far as I can tell, the person who first discovered that I exist. "Good morning," he says, with the kind of pleasantness that contains no warmth at all. "Mr. Webb." I straighten my back. I've learned to do that around him. "You're here early." "I often am." He walks toward me slowly, his shoes making no sound on the wet marble. "How are you feeling, Peter?" The way he uses my first name sends cold water down my spine every time. "Fine," I say. "Thank you." "Good. Good." He stops a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back, studying me with the calm, assessing gaze of a man who has spent 40 years evaluating assets. "You should know that Dr. Ross Harmon has made the board aware of some recent health-related developments." I go very still. Dr. Harmon is the company's private physician. He has nothing to do with me. I have never met him. I have no idea how he could possibly know anything about my health. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean," I say carefully. Marcus Webb's expression doesn't change. "I think you do." He reaches into his breast pocket and produces a small white envelope, which he holds out toward me. "The board would like to offer you a private arrangement. Housing, medical care, a stipend. Everything you and the child will need, in exchange for your discretion." The child. My hand finds my abdomen again before I can stop it, and I watch his eyes track that movement, and something calculates behind them. "Who told you?" My voice comes out steadier than I feel. "That's not the important question right now." "It is to me." A pause. His jaw shifts slightly. "Harmon has access to the building's health monitoring system, air quality sensors, biometric baseline tracking for the safety of executive personnel. The third-floor corridor where the cleaning crew takes breaks registers elevated hormone markers every morning between 4 and 5. The system flagged it. Harmon traced the source." He pauses. "You didn't know about the sensors." "I didn't. Of course I didn't. No one told the cleaning crew that the air itself was reporting on us. And the board?" My mouth is dry. "Why does the whole board know?" Something flickers across his face, almost discomfort maybe. "Because the child's parentage has implications for the company's succession structure. The board was informed as a matter of fiduciary responsibility." There it is. Not concern for me, not concern for a person. Fiduciary responsibility. The baby is a corporate variable. I look at the envelope in his outstretched hand and I do not take it. "Mr. Webb," I say. "Does Chairman White know?" The silence that follows is 3 seconds long, and it tells me everything. "The chairman is currently managing a significant merger negotiation," Marcus says. "The board feels it would be counterproductive to—" He doesn't know. I take a step back from the envelope. "The whole board knows, and no one has told him." "Peter, why?" I hear something sharp enter my voice, something that surprises even me. "What are you protecting? Him, or the succession plan?" Marcus Webb lowers the envelope slowly. For the first time, something real moves through his expression, something that might, if I were generous, be called regret. "Both," he says quietly. "The man has given 20 years to this company. The merger closes in 3 weeks. If his attention fractures now, that's not your decision to make." I pick up my mop. My hands are shaking, but I keep them moving. Or mine? Or the board's? That's his. I start pushing the mop again. I can feel Marcus Webb watching me from behind. "Think about what you're leaving on the table," he says, and his voice is measured and reasonable and utterly bloodless. "I'll think about it," I say, "and I won't take the envelope. Not today, not ever, probably. But I need him to leave before I fall apart in this corridor, and giving him a thread of hope is the only way to do that." I hear his shoes finally, moving back toward the elevator. The doors open, close. I stand in the empty corridor as the morning light grows gold and slow through the windows, and I breathe, and I rest my forehead briefly against the mop handle, and I let myself feel for just a moment the full weight of being the only person in this equation who doesn't have all the information and also doesn't have any power. The baby shifts, or at least I imagine it does, because it's far too early for movement, and I straighten up and I finish the floor. 6 weeks earlier, I had not yet known about the board. I had not yet known about Marcus Webb. I had only known that I was pregnant, that the father was one of the most powerful men in the city, and that I needed income and health coverage in a way I never had before. The cleaning job at Whitmore Capital was, I want to be clear, a coincidence, or mostly a coincidence. I had applied to 3 different commercial cleaning companies. This was the one that called back first, and it paid better than the others. And the overnight shift meant I could still attend my daytime thesis appointments without conflict. I did not take the job because of Damon White. But I won't pretend that the address didn't give me a complicated feeling when I saw it. My first week, I learned the building's rhythms, the way you learn a new language, haltingly, by immersion. The lobby crew mopped marble from midnight to 1. The mid-floor crew took offices 2 through 20 from 1 to 3. We were the executive crew, floors 38 through 45, from 3 in the morning until 6. 4 of us. Me, a woman named Cynthia who had worked the shift for 11 years and had opinions about everything, a quiet older man named Gerald who listened to jazz on earbuds and never once complained about anything, and a young guy named Raffi who was saving for culinary school and spent his breaks looking at recipes on his phone. I loved them, actually. I loved them. That surprised me. The easy, uncomplicated warmth of working alongside people who are simply doing a job. Without politics, without positioning, without any of the ambient social performance that saturated my graduate program. Cynthia taught me the right angle for mopping corners in the first week. Gerald showed me how to buff the brass elevator frames without leaving streaks. Rafi shared whatever he had packed for his 4 a.m. snack break, which was always something extraordinary. Once an entire miniature charcuterie board, once fresh-baked cardamom rolls still warm from his mother's oven. I was happy, in a strange and compartmentalized way, during those hours, and I was afraid in the remaining hours of every day. The nausea hit me at 9 in the morning, every morning, like a wall. I had learned to schedule nothing before 10. I had started eating crackers constantly, tucking them into every bag and jacket pocket, eating them surreptitiously in seminar rooms and library stacks. My thesis advisor, Dr. Patel, had noticed that I looked tired and asked if everything was all right, and I had said yes, and then spent 20 minutes in the bathroom afterward, sitting on the floor and pressing my face against the cool tile wall. I had not told anyone. I was trying to figure out what to do. That was what I told myself. I was gathering information, considering options, making a plan. But honestly, I think I was also just terrified. Of the logistics, yes, but more than that, of what it would mean to make this real by speaking it aloud. And underneath that, the question I could not stop circling. What about him? Damon White. I had thought about him more than I was comfortable admitting in the weeks since the gala, not only because of what we'd shared, though I thought about that too, warm and precise and aching, but because of who he'd been in those few hours. The way he listened. The way he'd laughed once, low and surprised, when I said something about the building's architect that struck him as funny. The way he'd looked at me in the pale blue hour before dawn when I'd finally gathered my things to leave, his expression open in a way that had nothing of the chairman in it, nothing armored, nothing managed. Just a man who looked at someone and didn't want them to go. He hadn't asked for my number. I hadn't offered it. There had been something almost mutual about that omission, as though we'd both understood that what had happened existed in its own sphere, separate from daylight, separate from ordinary life, and we were protecting it by leaving it there. I had protected it so well, I was now carrying his child alone. The Thursday of my 3rd week on the job, it happened. I had just come around the corner of the 43rd floor corridor, bucket in tow, when the elevator opened and Damon White walked out. My heart stopped, not metaphorically. I felt it actually stutter, a physical interruption in my chest, before it lurched back into a rapid and undignified rhythm. He was in a dark suit, tie slightly loosened, the jacket over his arm. It was 4002 in the morning. He looked like a man who had been awake since early the previous morning, which he probably had been. His hair was doing the thing at his temples, slightly curling, just enough to be soft. His eyes were directed at his phone. He walked 3 steps down the corridor before he looked up. And he saw me. The recognition happened in stages across his face. First, a general awareness of a person in the corridor. Then, a slight adjustment as his eyes actually registered me. Then a stillness, the complete, arrested stillness of a man who has not expected a particular thing and is processing it in real time. Peter. One word, my name and his voice, and I felt it from my sternum down. Mr. White, I said, steady, neutral, a cleaning crew employee to the chairman of the board. He didn't take his eyes off me. Something moved through them, something I couldn't read or wouldn't let myself read. You work here, he said. I do. Since when? 3 weeks. A pause. A pause. He glanced down at the mop, at the uniform, at the bucket with the squeaky wheel, and then back up at my face, and his expression did something complicated that I couldn't fully parse. It wasn't pity. It wasn't distance. It was something closer to what I'd seen in the blue hour before dawn, that unguarded quality, except now it was also mixed with something that looked like it was costing him something to hold back. Are you all right? He asked. The question undid me more than I would ever admit to him. Are you all right? Not, what are you doing here? Not some version of the encounter carefully managed and dismissed, but that question, asked with what sounded like actual wanting to know. Yes, I said, of course. You left before I woke up, he said, very quietly. It wasn't an accusation, it was just a fact stated, and the fact was that he remembered. He remembered that I had left. He had woken up, and I was gone, and he had noted it. I had an early seminar, I said, which was true. Another pause. He was watching me in that careful, patient way he had, and I was suddenly aware of everything at once. The bump that wasn't visible yet, but that I was conscious of at every moment. The envelope Marcus Webb would give me 6 weeks from now that I didn't yet know about the heartbeat that was multiplying cells somewhere beneath my ribs. I felt transparent and opaque at once, certain he could see everything and certain he couldn't see anything. I'd like to see you again, he said, if you're open to that. My chest cracked open quietly somewhere in the back. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. He absorbed this. He didn't push, didn't argue, didn't perform hurt. He just nodded once, and something closed down very slightly behind his eyes, and he said, "All right, good night," I said, or good morning, Peter." He walked past me down the corridor, and I stood very still until I heard the door to his office open and close. And then I sat down on the floor next to my bucket and pressed both hands over my mouth and did not make a sound. By my 5th week, I had worked out the rhythm of Marcus Webb's surveillance. He appeared on the 43rd floor approximately every 3 days, always between 4:30 and 5 in the morning, always in a suit, always with the quality of a man who has arrived somewhere intentionally rather than happened upon it. Cynthia noticed him once and told me the executives sometimes came in early during high-pressure deal periods. I nodded and did not tell her what he and I talked about in the corridor when the others were in the break room. He never threatened. I want to be clear about that. Marcus Webb is not a villain, or not a simple one. He is a man who has structured his entire life around institutional loyalty, around the health and continuity of an organization he's given decades to, and I represent a variable that could disrupt the equation. He offers me things. Housing. He's mentioned a specific address in the north of the city, a building the company owns, medical coverage through the firm's private physician, a monthly stipend that would mean I never had to worry about money, not me, not the baby, not for years. In exchange, he wants me to be quiet, stay away from Damon, and let the board manage the situation. What managing the situation means in practice, he has never said directly. But I'm not naive. What I can't tell him, what I haven't told anyone, is that my silence isn't something I'm protecting to protect myself. It's something I'm protecting because I don't yet know what the right thing to do is, and until I do, I refuse to let anyone else decide. There are other board members. I've gathered this in pieces, the way you gather a mosaic. One tile at a time, each one incomplete until suddenly you step back and the whole image resolves. Dr. Terces Harmon, the company physician, is the one who found out first. He leaves printed reports on Marcus Webb's desk at the end of each month. One of the janitors on the lower floors told me about the reports, not knowing they were about me, saying only that he sometimes saw them when he cleaned the executive office suites. I've thought about asking to see one and decided I don't want to. Then there's Eleanor Voss, who sits on the board's ethics committee and whom I've never met but whose name keeps appearing at the periphery of these conversations. Marcus mentioned her once, in passing, saying that she had concerns. I don't know if those concerns are about the concealment from Damon or about me specifically. I've decided to hope it's the former. And there is, apparently, someone called the General Counsel. Marcus has said the lawyers have been made aware of the situation, which is a phrase so ominously bureaucratic that it keeps appearing in my nightmares. None of them have tried to contact me directly except Marcus. None of them have treated this like a human situation except, perhaps, Eleanor Voss with her concerns. To the rest of them, I am a complication in a corporate governance problem. The irony, the monstrous, almost funny irony, is that the one person in the building who has treated me like a human being is the one person who doesn't know any of this is happening. I see Damon White twice more in those weeks. Once from a distance through the glass walls of a conference room on the 45th floor, where I'm buffing the hallway, and he's standing at the head of a long table, hands on the polished surface, speaking to a room full of people who are all leaning forward like plants toward light. I watch him for exactly as long as it takes me to buff a 6-foot section of floor, and then I move on. The second time, he finds me. It's a Sunday morning, early, and I'm in the stairwell between 42 and 43, collecting the overnight waste from the small bins on each landing. I hear the door open above me and look up, and he's there in sweatpants and a t-shirt with a coffee cup in his hand, looking like he's slept in the building, which he probably has. He looks down at me. I look up at him. "Peter," he says, with the soft, slightly wrecked quality of a man who hasn't fully slept. "Morning," I say. He comes down the stairs, sits on a step, holds out the coffee cup in my direction. "I only have the one," he says, "but you look like you need it more." The observation startles a laugh out of me, quiet, involuntary. I sit on the step below him and accept the cup and take a sip, and the warmth of it spreads through me. And for a moment, I just let myself be a person sitting in a stairwell at 5 in the morning sharing coffee with someone I'm desperately attracted to and even more desperately terrified of. "You don't have to pretend," he says. I look up at him. "Pretend what?" "That you're fine, that we're strangers." He's looking at his hands. "I'm not asking for anything. I don't want you to have to pretend." My throat closes up. "Damon," I say, and his name in my mouth does something to both of us. I can feel it, the slight change in the air, the way he goes very still. I almost say it. Right there, in the stairwell, with the coffee warm in my hands and the early light just beginning to come through the narrow window on the landing. I almost say, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to change everything, and I'm so frightened I can barely breathe." Instead I say, "I think about you too." And that's true, and it's not enough. But it's what I can give him right now, in this moment, before the world comes in. He looks at me, and something in his expression is so unguarded and so careful at the same time that I have to look away. "That's something," he says. "It's something," I agree. We sit in the stairwell until his phone buzzes in his pocket and he has to go, and I sit for another 3 minutes alone, holding the empty cup and breathing. 3 weeks later, the merger is 5 days from closing. I know this because it's all Marcus will talk about. The merger closes Friday, and then, he implies, though never quite says, things will settle, and we can discuss the situation properly. The way he says properly makes me want to throw the mop bucket at him. I know this because Cynthia, who has worked here 11 years and has opinions about everything, says the whole building has gone strange this week. People are quiet in the wrong ways and loud in the wrong ways. The executive floors have lights on at all hours. She's found half-eaten room service trays in the 44th corridor every morning. And I know this because I can feel the tension coming off Damon White like weather. I see him at 7 in the morning on Wednesday, which means I've stayed almost an hour past the end of my shift, lingering in the 43rd floor copy room, organizing supply stock, telling myself it's necessary. He walks past the glass door of the copy room, stops, backs up. He looks terrible, actually. Beautiful and terrible. The kind of exhausted that makes a person look more real, more present, like all the polished surface has worn through and what's underneath is just the genuine man. He opens the copy room door. "You're still here," he says. "Supply inventory," I say, gesturing vaguely at the shelves. He looks at the shelves, which are impeccably organized. He looks at me. "Have you eaten?" he says. I start to say yes, and then realize that I haven't, that I've been managing the morning nausea, and it's eaten the whole first part of the day. Not properly. He disappears. Returns 8 minutes later with a paper bag from the catering room on 45, a croissant, a small container of fruit, a bottle of water. He puts these on the supply shelf next to me without ceremony and leans against the doorframe and crosses his arms and watches me eat with the focused, unsentimental manner of a person who has decided something and is following through on it. "You don't have to do that," I say, around a mouthful of croissant. "I know." "Damon?" "I'm not asking for anything," he says, the same words as the stairwell. "I promise. Just eat the croissant." I eat the croissant. And the fruit. And I drink the water, and he stands in the doorway the whole time, not talking, not checking his phone, just present in that particular way he has that makes the room feel steadier. When I finish, I fold the paper bag carefully and look at him. "The merger closes Friday," I say. "How do you know that?" "Cynthia." A ghost of a smile. "Of course." He uncrosses his arms. "Yes, Friday. And then?" He considers the question. "And then I'd like to take you to dinner, if you'll let me." My heart makes the lurching, stuttering movement it always makes around him. I look at my hands, at the paper bag, at the impeccably organized shelves. "There's something I need to tell you," I say. The quality of his attention shifts, becomes more complete somehow, which I didn't think was possible. "All right," he says quietly. "Not here." I meet his eyes. "And not now. But after Friday, before dinner, there's something you need to know." He holds my gaze for a long moment, reading me the way he reads things, carefully, thoroughly, without rushing. "Is it serious?" he asks. "Yes." "Are you safe?" 1. The question undoes me. Not is it about the company, not does it involve me, not anything about himself. "Are you safe?" "Yes," I say. "I'm safe." "Then I'll wait until Friday," he says, "and whatever it is, we'll figure it out." He says it so simply. We'll figure it out. As though it's already decided that we are a we, as though the figuring out is already something he's committed to before he even knows what he's committing to. I watch him walk away down the corridor, and I press both hands over my abdomen, and I say silently to the 11 weeks and some days old cluster of cells that has already completely rearranged my entire life, "Your father is a good man." I think he might be extraordinary. I am not naive enough to think Marcus Webb will simply wait. Thursday morning, I arrive at the building to find a different envelope. Not white this time. Cream, thicker, embossed in the corner with what I recognize as the company's legal insignia. It's taped to the inside of my locker in the cleaning crew's basement break room. My hands are steady when I open it, which surprises me. The letter is 2 pages of dense, lawyerly language that, when reduced to its essential meaning, says the following. Whitmore Capital Group's legal department has prepared a confidentiality agreement covering any information Peter Clayton may possess regarding matters pertaining to company personnel succession or the health of company interests. Signing would trigger the housing and financial provisions previously discussed. A meeting has been arranged for 6 a.m. Friday to finalize. 6 a.m. Friday, merger closing day. Marcus Webb is a man who understands timing. I fold the letter carefully. I put it back in the envelope. I put the envelope at the bottom of my bag. Then, I go do my shift. Cynthia can tell something is wrong. She has the particular perceptiveness of someone who has worked night shifts for years and learned to read subtle disturbances in controlled environments. She's basically become a human barometer for the building's emotional weather. You eat today? She asks me at the 4-tizered break, watching me pick at a package of crackers. Yes. Properly? I hear Damon's word in her mouth and almost laugh. Define properly. She reaches into her bag and hands me half of a sandwich, turkey, on that good dense bread, with something pickled in it that is extraordinary. Eat that, Cynthia. The chairman's been in since yesterday morning, she says as I eat the sandwich. Whole 45th floor has that pressure cooker feeling. Gerald says the lights in the boardroom were on until 2 a.m. She pauses. Big day tomorrow. Very big, I agree. She looks at me sideways. You know you can talk to me. I know. I'm not going to. She starts and then stops. Whatever it is, I've been through things. I'm not going to tell you what to do with it or fuss about it or make it into a thing. But if you need to talk, I'll listen. Cynthia has told me across 5 weeks of 4 a.m. breaks that she raised 3 kids largely alone, that she's been married to the same man for 31 years, that she's had 3 miscarriages before successfully carrying her youngest, and that she once threw a saucepan at a wall and put a hole in it and considered it one of her better decisions. She has said all of these things with the same matter-of-fact composure she brings to everything. I'm pregnant, I say. I hadn't planned to say it. It just arrives out of my mouth into the fluorescent-lit break room with its plastic chairs and its corkboard of shift schedules. Cynthia doesn't react with surprise. She just nods, slowly, the way someone nods when they've already considered a possibility. How far? She says. Almost 12 weeks. And the father? It's complicated. It always is. She takes back the second half of her sandwich and eats it, giving me time. You keeping it? Yes. Good. She says it without qualification. Just, good. Anything you need, you asked me. I nod. My eyes are burning. I look at the ceiling of the break room, that particular beige institutional tile, and I breathe. Thank you, I say. Don't thank me, Cynthia says. I want to hold the baby when it comes. Consider it payment. I almost cry then. I save it for the elevator on the way back up to 43, where I spend the rest of the shift being very thorough about the corners and not thinking about anything. The merger closes at noon. I know this because by the time I finish my shift at 6 and take the elevator down from 43, the lobby is already filling with people who have that particular energy of impending celebration, suit jackets straighter. The catered breakfast trays in the ground floor conference rooms visible through the glass, the front desk staff bright-eyed and early. I don't take the meeting Marcus Webb scheduled for 6 a.m. I'm not in my locker room at 6. I'm on the 45th floor, which I am not assigned to, finishing a mopping job I started at 5:45 by going slightly off my area, which is technically not permitted, but which Cynthia has told me nobody enforces. I finish the floor. I load the bucket. I stand at the window at the end of the 45th floor corridor and look out over the city at dawn. The light coming pink and pale blue over the buildings, the streets below already busy. The river visible in the middle distance catching the early gold. I rest my forehead against the cool glass. Peter. I don't spin around this time. I recognize his voice in my bones. I turn slowly. Damon White is standing at the elevator bank in the same clothes he's been wearing since yesterday, which means he hasn't slept, which means he's been here all night closing the thing that's been consuming his life for months. His eyes are tired and something else, something intent and careful and directed entirely at me. The merger closed, I say. 30 minutes ago. He walks toward me. Not fast, not cautious, just steadily. I got your message. I left him a note. An actual note, paper, slipped under the door of his office at 5:15. Just the window at the end of 45 after 6. P. You came, I say. Of course I came. He's close enough now that I can see the exhaustion in his face and the alertness beneath it and the cedar smell of him. and the way his hands are loose at his sides in a posture that means he is deliberately not reaching for anything, letting me set the terms. Damon. I look at him. Sit down. There's a bench at the end of the corridor. Ornamental, architectural, dark wood. We sit on it together, turn slightly toward each other, and the morning light comes through the window behind me and falls across his face. There's something. I start. Marcus Webb came to my office at midnight, he says. My breath catches. He told me, Damon says, that the board had been made aware of a situation involving a building employee and had prepared a resolution. He put a folder on my desk. His voice is very steady. His eyes are on my face. The folder had Dr. Harmon's reports in it, and a copy of the confidentiality agreement he asked you to sign. The silence is absolute. He told the board, I say. He didn't tell you. Until now. Until now. A beat. Why didn't he tell me when he found out? The merger. He didn't want to. I know why. Something moves through his expression. Not anger exactly, but a tightly controlled version of something adjacent to it. I want to know why you didn't tell me. I look at my hands. I didn't know how. Peter. His voice is quiet. Look at me. I look at him. You were going to tell me today, he says. Before the meeting with Marcus. Before any of it. You were going to tell me. Yes. Then tell me. So I do. I tell him about the positive test in the gas station bathroom. About the numbers. 12 weeks now. Almost exactly. About coming to work at Whitmore Capital, and how that wasn't about him, but had become about him. In the complicated way everything involving him became complicated. About Marcus Webb and the envelopes and the cream-colored letter from the lawyers. About the air quality sensors that reported on my hormones to the corporate physician. About sitting in the stairwell with his coffee cup and almost telling him and not being able to find the words. He listens to all of it with his hands on his knees and his eyes on my face and without interrupting once. When I finish, the morning is fully gold, the city humming below us. And we are two people on an ornamental bench at the end of a 45th floor corridor, and the space between us is full of something I can't name. Are you all right? He says. The same words as the corridor weeks ago. The same wanting to know quality. I don't know yet, I say honestly. I think I will be. The baby is. He pauses. Everything's healthy? As far as I can tell. I haven't. I've been doing home tests. I need to see an actual doctor. He nods. His jaw is working slightly, the way it does when he's processing something and holding the processing inward. I want to go with you. Damon, not as anything official. His voice is careful. Not as anything you haven't agreed to, just, I'd like to be there. I look at him for a long time, at the exhausted, alert, unguarded face of this man who has been awake all night closing a merger and who, when given information that would rearrange his life, asks first if I'm all right, and second if the baby is healthy, and third if he can be present for a doctor's appointment. Okay, I say. He exhales. Something in his shoulders changes. The board, I say. What are you going to do about the board? There will be a meeting, he says, and there's something in his voice that is very, very calm, and also very, very final. Several things will be said in that meeting that have needed to be said for some time. Marcus was trying to protect you, or the company. Probably both. I know. He looks out the window. Marcus has spent 40 years deciding what Whitmore Capital needs before Whitmore Capital asks. Sometimes he's right. This time, he stops. I would have wanted to know, from the beginning. Whatever was happening with the merger, whatever the timing, whatever the complications, I would have wanted to know. I know, I say quietly. I would have told you differently if I'd understood that. I would have told you sooner. He looks at me. You were protecting yourself, he says. You had no reason to trust how I would respond. You'd seen me for one evening and one night, and then I was a stranger in a corridor, for all the practical difference it made. He pauses. I should have tried harder to reach you. You didn't have my number. I know. I've regretted that every day since the gala. He says this plainly, without performance, the way he says everything. I should have asked. I wanted to. He stops. You were protecting it too, I say, remembering what I'd thought that blue morning when I'd slipped out of his apartment. What happened? Keeping it somewhere separate. He looks at me, and the expression on his face is the one I keep returning to in my memory. The unguarded one. The one that lives below the chairman and the suit and the managed presence. Yes, he says, that's exactly it. We sit for a moment in that honesty, which is the easiest thing between us and also the most frightening. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, I say. I'm not going to take the housing Marcus offered. Good, he says simply. I'm not asking for anything from you either. Peter. He says my name with a quiet force. You're carrying my child. That's not. He pauses, recalibrates. I'm not going to disappear. I don't know what we are or what we're doing, and I think we should figure that out carefully and at whatever pace you need. But I'm not going anywhere. That's not a negotiation. My chest aches. In the good way. In the terrifying way. I have a thesis to finish, I say. I'm planning to finish it even after. I'll need coverage. We'll work it out, he says. Whatever you need, we'll work it out. Will. Again, so easily. You should sleep, I say. You've been up for, 30 hours? Something like that. You can't go to a board meeting like that. The meeting won't be today. He looks at me. Today I'd like to go with you to get something to eat. Something real. Not a vending machine. Not a catered breakfast in a conference room. Something real. I think about the crackers in my jacket pocket. The persistent morning nausea that has, by this hour, subsided enough that actual food sounds possible. The croissant he brought me in the supply room that was the most thoughtful gesture anyone had made in months. I know a place, I say. It's not fancy. Good, he says. I'm tired of fancy. He stands and holds out his hand. I look at it. His hand. Broad palm, steady fingers, offered without urgency or pressure. I take it. The board meeting happens on Monday. I know what's said in it only because Damon tells me afterward over takeout in my apartment, sitting on my second-hand couch, while my cat, a large, opinionated tabby named Archimedes, who I've had since graduate school, sits between us and judges us both equally. Marcus Webb tried to frame the concealment as a protective measure. Eleanor Voss, of the Ethics Committee, did not accept this framing. Several things were said that, as Damon predicted, needed to be said. Dr. Harmon's reports and the surveillance methodology behind them prompted a longer conversation about privacy protocols and the scope of building health monitoring. The confidentiality agreement, which I never signed, was quietly shredded. And Marcus? I ask. He's retiring at the end of the quarter, Damon says, which he was already planning. He's been with the company for 37 years. I'm not going to. He pauses. It's complicated. Most things are, I say, in the tone of Cynthia. He looks at me with something in his eyes that is warmth and tiredness, and the beginning of something else. Something that needs time to grow properly, that we are both being deliberate about not rushing. Eleanor Voss wants to meet you, he says. She was? The one person in that room who was asking the right questions from the start, apparently. She's the one who was pressing Marcus. I'd like to meet her, I say. Archimedes stands up on the couch cushion, marches across Damon's lap, kneads his thighs twice with complete disregard for the fact that those are expensive trousers, and settles there. Damon looks down at him with an expression of surprised helplessness. He likes you, I say. He's using me as a heating pad. That's his version of liking someone. Damon looks up at me, and the expression on his face, the warmth of it, the quiet realness of it, does what his expressions always do, which is dismantle me from the inside. The first appointment is Wednesday, I say, 9 a.m. I'll be there. You don't have to rearrange, Peter. Just my name, just quiet certainty. Okay, I say. He reaches out and rests his hand on the back of the couch, near my shoulder, not touching, just near, an offer. I lean back into it. His hand, warm and certain, settles gently on my shoulder, and the weight of it is the particular weight of someone who intends to stay. I don't know what we're doing, I say. We're figuring it out, he says. That's not very specific. No. A pause. But it's real. I turn my head and look at him. Really look. At the exhaustion that's finally easing at the man beneath the chairman, at the person who has been consistent and careful and present in every version of this situation. Even the one he didn't know he was in. Tell me something, I say, before all of this, before the gala, before everything, what were you like? He considers this. Busy, he says, very busy. I thought I was happy. I think I was, satisfied maybe, moving fast enough that I didn't have to look at the gaps. And now? Slower, he says, considerably scared, completely awake. Archimedes rumbles on his lap. The city makes its city sounds beyond the window. The evening is soft and ordinary, the kind of ordinary that contains everything. I think I'm going to love this, I say, and I mean the baby, but I also mean more than the baby, and by the way he looks at me, he understands both. I think so too, he says. The doctor's name is Dr. Lena Marsh, and she has the energy of someone who has seen everything and is delighted by most of it. She shakes Damon's hand and mine without ceremony, sits us both in the examination room with the air of a person who has no interest in awkwardness, and pulls up the ultrasound with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 10,000 times. And then the sound. The heartbeat. I've read about the first time you hear it, read descriptions, been told by other people, by Cynthia, who cried through all three of hers, and by Rafi, whose older sister had a baby last year, and by Dr. Bai Patel, my thesis advisor, who revealed during office hours that she has 4 children and considers the first heartbeat one of the most significant sounds a person ever hears. None of it prepares me for the actual sound. It's fast. Faster than I expected. A quick, strong, confident rhythm. This tiny, insistent life, already fully committed to the project of existing. I press my lips together. My eyes fill. I feel Damon's hand close around mine, and I glance at him, and his jaw is tight and his eyes are bright, and he is staring at the monitor with an expression of pure, unguarded astonishment. Good, strong heartbeat, Dr. Fun, Marsh says, with the satisfied tone of someone reporting good news. 12 weeks, 3 days, consistent with your timeline. Everything looks exactly as it should. Good, Damon says. His voice is a little rough. I squeeze his hand. He squeezes back. We watch the screen together. This small, bright shape, this improbable person, this evidence of one extraordinary night at a gala where I spilled champagne on a $4,000 suit. Have you thought about names? Doctor, Marsh asks, in the practical tone of someone moving through a checklist. I look at Damon. He looks at me. We're working on it, I say. He makes a sound that is, almost certainly, a laugh. Short, surprised, warm. Take your time, Dr. Marsh says. You have about 27 weeks to argue about it. The thesis defense is in March. Damon comes. He sits in the back of the seminar room with the careful stillness of a man who knows how to be unobtrusive, which is a skill one wouldn't necessarily expect from a man of his particular profile, but which, I have come to understand, is native to him. He watches, he listens, he does not make his presence a thing. Afterward, in the hallway, Dr. Tick Patel shakes my hand and says, I've done exceptional work, and her eyes flick once to Damon White standing a respectful distance away, and something moves through her expression that I can't quite read. Congratulations, Dr. Clayton, she says. On everything. She's seen the bump by now. I'm 21 weeks. There's no hiding it, and I stopped trying to at around 17 weeks. And Cynthia's reaction when I showed up to my shift with a clearly visible pregnancy was to say, there it is, with the satisfaction of someone who has been patient. Dr. Clayton. I hold the title in my chest for a moment, feeling the weight of it. The years of work that title contains. The early mornings and late nights and thesis chapters written while exhausted and nauseous and frightened. The mop bucket with the squeaky wheel and the fluorescent light of the executive corridor and the specific, precise sound of a heartbeat at 12 weeks, 3 days. Damon is at my side. Doctor. Clayton, he says, testing the name the way he tests everything, with attention, with care. Don't, I say, smiling despite myself. I like it. You're embarrassing. I've been told that, he says, and from the way he says it, there's a history in those words. A version of himself before, that was perhaps not this easy, not this warm, not this willing to be embarrassing in a university hallway in front of his partner's thesis committee. We walk out into the March afternoon, the light pale and full of the specific quality of winter ending, and he takes my hand, and we walk to the car he's left around the corner. And I lean my head against his shoulder in the back seat, which I have never done before, which feels like an arrival. Tell me what you need, he says, as the car moves through the city. I don't know yet, I say. A week where nothing happens. I can't promise a week, he says, but I can promise a weekend. A weekend where nothing happens and someone else cooks. Done. And Archimedes has to sleep in the bedroom. Also done, though for the record, your cat despises me. He doesn't despise you, he's testing you. He knocked my coffee off the desk this morning. That means he likes you. He ignores people he doesn't like. A pause. That's a concerning system. He's a cat, it's very standard. I feel him laugh, the movement of it against my temple. The city moves past outside. The baby, who we are going to name Elliot, which we agreed on after 17 days of arguing about it, kicks me gently in the ribs the way Elliot has been doing for 3 weeks now, with the persistent cheerfulness of someone who has opinions and is not shy about expressing them. He did it again, I say. Damon's hand moves to my abdomen, cautious and certain, the way it always is. Waits. Elliot obliges. Another small, firm kick against his palm. Hello, Damon says softly to my stomach, and the word is so simple and so full that I close my eyes. Eleanor Voss has white hair and dark eyes, and the particular directness of a woman who has spent decades in rooms where people talked around what they actually meant. We have lunch at a restaurant she chooses, not flashy, not tempting, a place with good soup and tables far enough apart for actual privacy. She looks at me across the table with the assessing quality of someone who has been curious about something for months and is finally in the position to ask. You didn't sign the agreement, she says. No. Even with what was on offer. No. She picks up her spoon. Marcus thought you would, given the financial precarity. Marcus thought I was only a problem to be managed, I say carefully. He forgot that I'm also a person with a different kind of interest in this situation than the board. Eleanor looks at me for a moment. The board should have handled this differently from the start, she says. I said so at the time. When Harmon presented the initial report, I argued that the chairman should be informed immediately, that concealment created more liability and more harm than disclosure. I was voted down. She sets down her spoon. I want you to know that. I know, I say. Damon told me. I want you to know it from me, not secondhand. She pauses. I also want to say, what was done to your privacy was not acceptable. The monitoring system, Harmon's reports. I've been pushing for an independent review of the building's health data protocols. That will happen. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's basic human dignity. She picks up her soup spoon again. Now, tell me about your thesis. Damon says it's on 20th century institutional architecture. I blink, slightly thrown by the pivot. Institutional architecture and its relationship to social control, yes. The way building design has historically reflected and reinforced power structures. Eleanor Voss looks at me with an expression that suggests she is reconsidering me upward. That's interesting, she says. And here you are, working in one of those power structures. In its cleaning crew, I say, which is technically the most honest position in any power structure. She makes a sound that is, I'm almost certain, a laugh. Yes, she says, I imagine it is. We eat our soup, we talk about architecture. Eleanor Voss is sharper and funnier than her corporate presentation would suggest. And by the end of lunch, I understand something about the board that I didn't before. That the institution is not monolithic. that Marcus Webb and Eleanor Voss have been playing out a version of the same disagreement for years, and that what happened with me was one battle in a longer argument about what Whitmore Capital is for. Walking out into the afternoon, Eleanor stops on the sidewalk and looks at me with her dark, direct eyes. "He's different," she says. "Damon, since all of this." "How?" "Present," she says. "He was always competent, always capable. But there's a quality of being actually here that's new." She pauses. "It suits him." I look at the sidewalk, feel the warmth of what she's saying and the weight of it. "I think he suits himself better too," I say. "Or he's learning to." She nods. "Take care of yourself, Peter, and—" She glances, very briefly, at my visible pregnancy. "Congratulations, genuinely." She walks away down the sidewalk, straight-spined and purposeful, and I stand for a moment in the afternoon sun and feel, with a clarity that almost makes me dizzy, how much has changed. At 3 in the morning, 2 days before my due date, I cannot sleep. This is not unusual. I haven't slept properly in weeks. The weight and the positioning and the specific discomfort of being very pregnant make proper sleep architectural rather than biological. I construct sleep the way I might construct a temporary structure, using pillows as load-bearing elements, testing positions for stability, accepting a kind of functional collapse rather than actual rest. I'm sitting in the chair by the bedroom window, which has become my 3 a.m. position, looking out at the city lights and drinking the chamomile tea that Cynthia told me was the only thing that helped in the final stretch. Damon appears in the bedroom doorway, rumpled and half awake, and looks at me in the chair. "Couldn't sleep," I say, before he can ask. "I know." He crosses to the other chair. "We rearranged the bedroom furniture last month so we'd both have somewhere to be in the 3 a.m. hours. He carries his own mug of something. He sits. We sit together in the city-lit dark. I keep thinking about the building," I say. "Whitmore? The marble floors, the fluorescent lights, the mop." I look at my hands. It doesn't feel like a different life. It feels like the same life, but from a different angle. "Ush. Architecture and its relationship to social control," he says, and the fact that he's internalized my thesis enough to quote it back at me does something warm and complicated to my chest. "Exactly." I look out the window. The building didn't change. I changed what I was doing in it. He's quiet for a moment. "I didn't know," he says. "That's the thing I keep coming back to. You were in my building for weeks, and you knew everything. The pregnancy, the board, what Marcus was doing, and I was up there on 45 not knowing any of it. I was going to tell you." "I know." He looks at his mug. "I'm not. It's not a reproach. I'm just, when I think about you in that stairwell, in that copy room, carrying all of that alone." "I wasn't entirely alone," I say. "Cynthia knew. Eventually. Cynthia deserves a significant raise. She's already got one. I'm told someone anonymous insisted. He has the grace to look slightly caught. Damon. She took care of you," he says, with the simple finality of someone who considers the matter settled. I look at him. At this man in my apartment, in the chair we moved from the corner last month, holding a mug of tea at 3 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. At the person who showed up for every appointment, who sat in the back row of my thesis defense, who learned that Archimedes' love language is deliberate property destruction and has adapted to this with genuine equanimity, who fought, quietly and completely, with the board about the privacy breach, about the concealment, about what the company owed to the people who moved through it. "Come sit here," I say. He looks at the chair I'm in, which is not large. "Peter, that chair is big enough if we're deliberate about it. Come sit here." He comes. We rearrange ourselves with the particular comedy of 2 adults in a single armchair, and then we're there. His arm around me, my legs across his lap, the city below us, the night quiet. Elliot pressing steadily against my ribs in that persistent, cheerful way. "Hey," Damon says softly, his hand on my stomach. 2 more days." Elliot kicks. "He knows," I say. "He's always known," Damon says. "He's been the most informed person in this entire situation." I laugh. Real, genuine, the kind that catches you off guard. Damon's expression when I laugh even now, even after months, is the expression of a man who is still slightly surprised and completely delighted every time. This is going to be very difficult, I say, when the laugh settles. Yes, we don't entirely know what we're doing. No. The logistics are, there are so many logistics. The thesis revisions and the fellowship I applied for and where we actually live and, Peter. His arm tightens slightly around me. I know. I want to say it out loud, that I know it's complicated, that I'm not. I know you're not pretending it isn't, he says. I'm not either. He pauses. But we have already, between us, navigated a corporate cover-up, 3 months of near silence in an elevator building, one extremely judgmental cat, your thesis committee, my board, Eleanor Voss, and approximately 47 separate logistics conversations. I think we can handle the next 47. I lean my head against his shoulder. The cleaning job, I say. I want you to know. I don't regret it. I know I know how it looks to people who find out. But those months, those early mornings with Cynthia and Gerald and Rafi, I was really happy in a way I didn't expect. He's quiet for a moment. I know, he says. I could see it. That morning in the copy room, when you were organizing the shelves even though they were already perfect, you weren't miserable. You were somewhere else in your own thoughts, and you seemed settled. You notice that? I notice everything about you, he says plainly. I have, since the gala. Since you said the thing about the architect that made me laugh, I've been paying attention. The city below breathes its city breath. Elliot is still. Damon's hand is warm on my stomach. When I left that morning, I say, after the gala, when you woke up and I was gone. Yes. Were you? I pause. What did you feel? A long moment. Like the best thing that had happened in years had walked out while I was asleep, he says, and like I'd let it happen because I was too, I don't know, careful. I'm a person who is very careful, and careful can become cowardice if you let it. It didn't, I say, in the end. In the end, he agrees. I sat in a stairwell and offered you a coffee cup. And that was? I stop. What? That was when I almost told you, I say. In the stairwell. When you said you didn't want me to pretend, that was when I knew something was wrong, he says. Or not wrong, something was heavy. I could see it. I didn't know what it was. I was scared of what you'd do. And now? I look up at him. In the city-lit 3 a.m. dark, in the armchair that is just large enough, with Elliot quiet for the moment between us. Now I know what you do, I say. You show up. That's what you do. You just show up. He looks at me with that expression. The unguarded one. Yes, he says. That's about right. Elliot Charles White Clayton arrives on a Thursday morning, which is not interesting, until you consider that it was also a Thursday morning 11 months ago, almost exactly, that I first mopped the floors of the 43rd floor of Whitmore Capital Group and wheeled a squeaky-wheeled mop bucket around a corridor that smelled of marble and cleaning solution and the specific ambient electricity of power. He is 7 pounds, 4 ounces. He has, against all reason, a full head of dark hair, which Damon takes as a personal vindication. Cynthia is in the waiting room with Gerald and Rafi, who have brought respectively a handmade blanket in pale yellow, Cynthia's own hands, I find out later, a small stuffed bear with jazz musician styling, Gerald, who presents it with gruff dignity, and an entire tray of cardamom rolls that no one is supposed to eat in the hospital, and everyone immediately eats in the hospital. Eleanor Voss sends a card. Inside it says only, well done. Both counts. V. Marcus Webb sends nothing, which is its own kind of statement, and which I decide to let mean whatever it means. Dr. Patel emails, congratulations, Dr. Clayton. The fellowship committee has confirmed your deferral. Archimedes, when we come home 4 days later, approaches the car seat with the elaborate suspicion of a creature encountering something he did not authorize, sniffs once at Elliot's head, and then, definitively, with complete lack of acknowledgement that this is a significant gesture, sits down next to the car seat and begins to wash his face. He accepts him, Damon says in a tone of genuine relief. He accepts him, I confirm. Elliot sleeps. The apartment holds all of us. The city goes on beyond the window. I stand in the kitchen at 1 in the morning, warming a bottle, and I think about floors, about the specific quality of marble under fluorescent light at 4 in the morning, about the mop moving in slow arcs, the wet trails that catch the light and then fade, about what it means to clean a space, to do the invisible, necessary work of keeping things going, the work that happens while the world is asleep and that the world, waking, never thinks to credit. I was a janitor. I'm an architectural historian. I'm a new parent. I'm the person who carries a child whose existence revealed, to a large and powerful institution, the limits of what it knew about itself. I was always, underneath all of this, just a person trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. I think I did okay. Damon appears in the kitchen doorway, hair entirely disorganized, wearing the expression of a man who has been awake for a quantity of hours he is no longer tracking and who is by any observable measure happier than he's been in years. "Let me," he says, reaching for the bottle. "I have it." "Peter." "I have it," I say again, but gently, and I hand it to him and we go together back to the bedroom where Elliot is making the small preliminary sounds of incoming hunger. And Damon sits in the chair with the baby and the bottle with the concentrated, awed attention of someone encountering something extraordinary for the first time and not quite believing his luck. I watch them. I think about the note under the door of the chairman's office, the window at the end of 45 after 6 p. I think about his hand held out to me, broad palm, steady fingers, offered without urgency or pressure. I think about what he said in the armchair the night before Elliot came. I've been paying attention. I lean in the doorway and I watch my son eat breakfast with his father in the pre-dawn quiet of the apartment, and outside the city hums its city hum. And somewhere across town the cleaning crews are arriving for the early morning shift, and the mop is moving in slow arcs across the marble of the 43rd floor, and none of them know what happened in that corridor. None of them know what the air itself was recording, and none of that matters anymore. What matters is this room. This morning. This. The whole board knew and kept it, and it kept them busy for months. In the end, the only thing that needed to happen was one man in a stairwell asking, "Are you all right?" And me, finally, sitting down next to him. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe, comment down your favorite part of the story, and if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, make sure to join our Patreon. Link is in the description. Even one member genuinely means the world to me. See you in the next one.